Good evening, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of Marvelous Medicine. Today's topic is on neonatal intensive care in resource-limited settings. We are heading into our Children's Day on November 14th, and it seems apt that we should be discussing about improving infant survival. So, India's infant mortality rate was 139.19 per 1,000 live births in 1971. Now it has decreased to 28 deaths per 1,000 live births in 2021. Though on paper it seems to be a good reduction, we are far behind the top countries in the world where the infant mortality is below 2 per 1,000 live births. On top of all this, the infant mortality in rural areas in India is 1.5 times that of urban areas, and the female infant mortality rate is higher than that of male. There is also a great variation among states. As per the 2019 statistics, Kerala and Delhi performed the best with an infant mortality rate of 6 and 11 per 1,000 live births, whereas UP and Madhya Pradesh did the worst with 41 and 46 respectively. So the only solution to this seems to be to improve our obstetric, anesthetic, pediatric and neonatal care. So I welcome Sridhar to shed some light on how we can improve our neonatal care in resource-limited settings. To introduce him briefly, Sridhar Kalyansundaram is a consultant neonatologist and head of neonatology at Danat Al Emirat Hospital, Abu Dhabi, which has a 33-bedded level 3 neonatal ICU. Sridhar did his MBBS from Stanley Medical College with gold medals in physiology, pathology, ENT, medicine, surgery, and obstetric gynae. He seems to have missed out any special gold medal in peds. He was also the best outgoing student of his batch. Sridhar did his MD Pediatrics from JIPMER Pondicherry and DM Neonatology from PGI Chandigarh. He went over to UK and did his MRCPH and FRCPH from the Royal College of Pediatrics and Child Health. He has several publications and presentations to his credit. He runs a YouTube channel for parent education. Despite his busy schedule and difference in timings, Sridhar readily accepted to give this talk when I reached out to him. Thank you, Suma, for putting me in touch with Sridhar. Moderating the session will be Dr. Naveen Jain, who is the Senior Consultant Neonatologist, KIMS Health, Trivandrum. Naveen did his MBBS and MD Pediatrics from Trivandrum and DM Neonatology from PGI Chandigarh. His special interest is follow-up of high-risk newborns. He is the editor of Clougherty Manual of Neonatology and the Illingworth Textbook of Child Development. Thank you, Naveen, once again for readily accepting to join Marvelous Medicine. Leela is an old friend and she too agreed readily when I reached out to her. Dr. Leela Sudhakaran Kamath is the professor and head of Department of Neonatology, MOSC Medical College, Kochi. She did her MBBS and MD Pediatrics from Maulana Azad Medical College, Delhi. She got her American board certification in pediatrics after doing her residency in St. Luke's Roosevelt Hospital, New York. She did her FRCP Pediatrics and FRCP Neonatal Perinatal Medicine in Canada. She did her fellowship in Hospital for Sick Kids, Mount Sinai, and Hospital for Women and Children at Toronto. She came back to India and started the level 3 NICU at SUT Hospital, Trivandrum. She was also running the DNB Neonatology till recently and currently conducts the DM Neonatology course. Welcome, Sridhar, Naveen, and Leela. Over to you, Sridhar.
Thank you so much, Dr. Vidya, for introducing and inviting as well. This is a great opportunity, and we obviously have very fond memories of JIPMER. I'm very happy to see my Professor Srinivasan here as well. Hello, sir. Good evening. And my relationship with Naveen and friendship goes a long way back, and we were both DM residents at the same time. So I have some stories to share in the end if we have time. And thank you, Naveen, for moderating along with Dr. Leela. And thank you, Suma, again. I'll share my screen. So I hope all of you can see and hear me well. And I'll start the slideshow. So this is just me, Naveen, and Monica, 3 neonatologists trained from PGI, and Monica did a TM in AIIMS. This was when Naveen visited Dubai recently. So you already listed, but the reason I put it here is to show that I do have some credentials to talk about care in India. So I've spent quite a bit of time away from India, but I still keep in touch. It's very close to my heart. And obviously, our teachers in JIPMER and PGI laid the foundation for where we are now. So very thankful to all of them. So Stanley Medical College, obviously my memories in neonatology in Stanley Medical College. We have, I don't know if any of you did medicine in Stanley, RSRM was attached, and that is the main obstetric unit. And we had a small neonatal intensive care led by Dr. Vijay Kumar at that time. Basic intensive care. I mean, in JIPMER Pondicherry, I mean, we were introduced to mechanical ventilation for the first time, and actually it was a new ventilator. Everyone was getting their feel on it. And whenever we had to ventilate in the pediatric intensive care in Ward 21, we sometimes got the jet ventilator from, which was a very small device, not the high frequency jet ventilator. So it was a portable ventilator we used to use. So we learned basics of ventilation there, but not the nuances. And now currently JIPMER Pondicherry is one of the top institutes, and DM training in neonatology as well. DM in PGI was quite at an advanced stage already, and Professor Naran and Professor Praveen, Dr. Saurabh, everyone taught me during that period, and Naveen was my colleague during that period as well. Dr. Patta had mentioned in the Facebook post introducing the session about my setting up neonatal intensive care, and I did have the experience developing in a resource limited setting relatively. I mean, Coimbatore is a city, but relatively resource limited in that period. When we had to train the nurses, we had to introduce more intensive care there and improve the outcome within a short time. But I moved to UAE, then to UK, and now back in UAE since 2012. Neonatology is a rapidly advancing field in medicine, and great improvements in the outcome, even in the extreme preterm babies in the past 20-30 years. Most of the advances when it comes to the developed countries, we have consistently good results, and most of the research in the field happens in these countries, even though a lot of research comes from our countries as well. The field changing research many times comes from the Western countries due to better resources and so on. So what happens in settings like India, for example? So I'll give you a couple of cases. These are not the typical ones, but not too far-fetched either. So this is a real case. One of the medical representatives who meets me, he mentioned he lost his baby recently last year in Kerala. I mean, this mother was priming, and she went into labor while in her village. In Kerala, it's not really village, it's all continuous, but I mean, they call it villages. Her husband works in Dubai, as I said, as a medical rep, and 39 weeks gestation. The family took her to a nearby hospital because they didn't expect problems, but the hospital did not have facility for cesarean delivery. She had, unfortunately, non-progressive labor and fetal distress with meconium stained liquor, and they decided that she needed this LSCS. There was no ambulance. They took in their own vehicle to the nearest town about 1 hour away. The cesarean was done. However, the baby had severe asphyxia and died on day 2. The second case is a case in Tamil Nadu where a preterm baby at 33 weeks, 1.8 kilo, was born in a district hospital, which currently has the special care neonatal unit. They could manage CPAP, but they didn't have facilities for mechanical ventilation. No antenatal steroids were given as the mother was unbooked. She came and delivered quickly. The baby had severe RDS, started CPAP, but not oxygenating well. There was no surfactant and no mechanical ventilator in that setup. So the pediatrician, who had some neonatal training, decided to transfer the baby to the nearest medical college hospital by ambulance. However, there was no transport ventilator. They could not give CPAP in transport, so they just needed nasal cannula oxygen. Unfortunately, the RDS went into a vicious cycle. The baby went into shock, did not survive the transport. So these are incidents. I mean, this used to happen quite frequently during my training days, and it's still happening. And unfortunately, these happen in the rural settings, and many times the babies pass away even before they reach a medical facility. So birth asphyxia, I mean, the maternal mortality has decreased a lot, but still birth asphyxia continues to be a problem due to lack of timely intervention. Kernicterus stress still happens, even though most of the developed world they're taking precautions. Hypoglycemic brain injury still happens, sepsis, meningitis. I remember in JIPMER days when we used to have pus from the CSF. I've not seen that since then, but still in rural parts of India, it's happening. extreme prematurity and its accompanying needs for sophisticated management is fairly low down in the list of priorities. So we should be focusing more on these areas. The way I approach this talk is to give you an overview of what the different concerns are and how we can approach it in the end. There are many variations in practice and adaptations as well. Adaptations, you can say, due to resource limitation, technical changes. It may not be ideal by guideline basis, but you use it what limited resources you have. So we have inability to give TPN, for example, in full. We may not be able to get central lines. We may not be able to give expensive medicines like surfactant. There's a higher rate of birth asphyxia due to poor obstetric care at the primary care setting. Higher poverty, poor nutrition, higher infection rates contribute as well, because the poor maternal health leads to poor fetal state as well. The cost as well as the shortage of beds leads to pressure to discharge early. So I saw a baby at follow-up who delivered in India at 28 weeks and the baby went home at 32 weeks. I know my friend Srinivas Murki is doing lots of studies on early kangaroo care, early pala-day feeding, discharging the babies early. So there is a lot of pressure. Here we have strict guidelines not to discharge the babies before they complete 35 weeks and 1.8 kilos, but many times in India we send home at 1.5 kilos or even 32 weeks gestation when they're not really ready to go home. We have lack of adequate follow-up post-discharge, either distance factor, availability factor as well. And there is shortage of the trained personnel and gaps in knowledge. Even though many experienced neonatologists are there all over the places in India, the spreading of knowledge is at a slow pace, and maybe the people aren't that keen to update themselves as well. So most of the primary care settings, the updating of knowledge happens at a slow pace. So Dr. Vidya mentioned in the start of the talk about the infant mortality. So this is when we were students, and you can see, I would focus on this part. I don't know if you can read it. So each of these numbers, they are like 4 to 14, 14 to 26, 26 to 40. So you can see how the scale changes after. This is from 2015. So the maximum range has become 42 to 96 instead of 187 to 170. So it's a uniform reduction in infant mortality all over the world, but to varying degrees. And India comes in this 20 to 40 range, as she explained. So obviously we have made great strides, and from hundreds to say 20 and 29 or so is still a big improvement. And this is the neonatal mortality rate, which follows a similar downward trend from 1990 to 2010. This is Southeast Asia, and the neonatal mortality is a main chunk of the infant mortality, so it's still 23 or so. This is the current neonatal mortality rate in India, like this is 2015 statistics report, I think. So the infant mortality is 42 and neonatal mortality 29 and early neonatal mortality 23. The most updated ones are what Dr. Vidya said, like 29 for the infant mortality. So it's still continuing to drop. This is a very interesting slide where they are showing the improvement in neonatal mortality in Europe. So you can see Europe and US, neonatal mortality per 1,000 live births. This is the year. So you can see that the current state of 20 neonatal mortality, of course, Kerala has come down to low levels in the below 10s already. And for the past many years, it's maintaining that. It's one of the few states, and Tamil Nadu is doing well as well in terms of outcomes. But the 20 mark in most of the states in India, it's not reached yet. And in Europe, it was reached in 1960s when the current modern day neonatology was not really developed. It's in the past 1990 onwards, you can say that we started getting the antenatal steroids, improved ventilation, surfactant came towards this period, and more improved forms of TPN, ventilation, everything came from 1990s. So you can say in the past 30 years is when the maximum advances happened, but you can see the neonatal mortality rate dropped from say 7 or 8 to 4 or 5 in that period. So it's not a big reduction. Majority of the chunk of changes happened with the hygiene changes, knowledge changes, more equitable awareness of healthcare facilities. So this is the level we are at. We are about 80, 70 years behind. So this came down to below 15 per 1,000 much before the current neonatal intensive care was widely available. And if you see here, actually the term neonatology as subspecialty was in the late 60s that it was coined. So even before the word neonatology was coined, it dropped significantly. And this is simply due to obstetric care and simpler improvements like warmth, feeding, infection prevention, and So dissemination of proper guidelines and knowledge. The National Neonatology Forum, and the WHO, Professor Ashok Dierari is involved in that a great deal, preparing guidelines and the educational videos based on simple guidelines, disseminating the information. And Srinivas Murki, for example, is very active in spreading CPAP all over the country. Dr. Karthik Nagesh and Abdul Razak, they published this in Archives in 2016, very interesting article. So obviously the stress on the big rural-urban divide, 60 to 70% population lives in the village, but the wealth distribution is majority in the urban areas. Most of the cities have excellent level 3 NICUs, mostly the corporate hospitals. And you can say that, the Rainbow Hospital, Apollo Group, and KIMS in Kerala, where Naveen is working, they all provide world-class care, comparable to anywhere else in the world, and their outcomes are comparable as well. And they do manage 23 weeks onwards like any other countries do. And recently, the government also has started focusing on improving the care in a more equitable way in the rural and semi-urban sectors as well. Globally, India contributes to 40% of low birth weight babies and a quarter of preterm babies and 27% of neonatal deaths. And this we mentioned earlier, this is the 2015 figure. The contribution of neonatal mortality to under 5 deaths is still as high as 56%. That means majority of the infant mortality and the under 5 mortality happens in the newborn period. So this is similar to most of the centers. So a National Neonatology Forum devised a level 1, level 2, level 3. So level 1 is basic resuscitation and healthy newborn care. Level 2, where the preterm care more than 32 weeks, it can be level 2A and 2B, depending on their ability to support. And level 3 is extreme preterm care, where you need high frequency ventilation, nitric in 3B, and just the normal ventilation in 3A. The public sector caters usually to the poorer section of the society who can't afford the private care. And the recent schemes in the government level, the formation of the special newborn care units have also provided an impetus in improving it, but we still have a long way to go to catch up. The primary care provides essential newborn care, neonatal resuscitation, thermal support, breastfeeding, and asepsis. But there is a lot of improvement to be made, lot of education, lot of sharing knowledge. We need more focus on people getting the impetus to do it, service spirit, and provided through newborn care corners and newborn stabilization units. The newborn stabilization unit is a more basic level, 4-bed unit, and they just provide the supportive care mentioned here. And the special care newborn units are secondary care units. They are developed more aggressively recently at district level. So most of the district level hospitals, they are converted to 12 to 20 bed units with 4 trained doctors, 10 to 12 nurses. However, the number of these units is only about 6,000 now. So we need to expand it much more to get the required number of beds we need. And again, as I said in the initial example, the degree of expertise available is not uniform. The degree of ability to ventilate sick babies, to monitor, is not good as well. And the government initiative is now offering incentives for the private NICUs to participate in the government insurance schemes as well. So the poorer patients may be able to benefit from better care. Most of the level 3 care in the public sector is in the larger district hospitals and in the medical college hospitals. It is improving, and people who have done training overseas or done DM or DNB neonatology, they are starting to teach in these institutions and improving the quality of care. And both the private sector and public sector medical colleges and the autonomous funded institutes are providing more fellowships, more nursing trainees in neonatology as well. The private sector is not very well regulated. As we know, in India, there's a lot of focus on commercial aspects, and obviously the corporate and larger private hospitals are really expensive, but they do develop better equipped NICUs which cater to the people who can afford such care, or the insurance coverage covers them. As I said, there is increasing number of fellowships now, more awareness in the pediatric doctors to do more neonatal training and improve their skills. Cost is obviously one of the key limiting factors, and actually I had asked Naveen about this a few months ago, and the cost of intensive care is about 5,000 to 10,000 rupees per day, and a preterm staying for 50 to 60 days could face a really huge bill in terms of the average earning capacity in India. So the GDP in India as a population or as a country is quite good. It's on the 4th place, but if you see per capita, it's very, very low. I mean, nowhere in the picture compared to these countries. So the extent of spending on health as a proportion of the GDP in India, it's only 1 to 2%, 1.5%. However, in most of the developed countries, it's close to 8 to 10%. So the proportion spending on health is very low in India as well. There is a significant rural-urban divide, as I mentioned in the beginning. So we have almost double the mortality rate in the rural areas compared to the urban areas for the same reasons we discussed earlier. And this is all across the states in India. You can see how some states have fairly low numbers, like Kerala doing extremely well, neonatal average mortality of close to 5, which is comparable to any Western country. The recommended NICU strength per million population is 30, so you would need roughly 30,000 level 3 beds and 100,000 level 2 neonatal beds, but the current numbers would be far below this, and you could count numbers for the sake of numbers, but the quality of care provided at a high level will be much more below that level as well. And with the government impetus, nearly 6,000 special care neonatal units have been developed, but this is still far below the target. And recruiting and retaining the trained medical and nursing manpower is a key. All of you would be familiar with the strikes happening all over India for how poorly paid the nursing staff are in many places, especially in the private hospitals. And no wonder that many of them leave the country even after getting training. Equipment is expensive. Maintaining the equipment is more expensive. So many of them buy the ventilator, but they don't buy the contract. And then when it goes faulty, then they're not able to fix it. And obviously, home deliveries still constitute 30 to 40% of all deliveries in the country. I'll just go through 3 different situations to highlight differences in practice between Western and Indian setup. For example, the approach to very preterm and extreme preterm babies, the controversy on antenatal steroid use in resource-limited settings, and the controversy on therapeutic hypothermia in resource-limited settings, which is a more recent controversy. So all of you might have come across this case in 2018 in November, when there was 23 to 24-week twins, almost 500 grams. The parents, the mother came suddenly and delivered. They couldn't afford the 8 lakh or 9 lakh bill that was mentioned to them. And one baby had died. The other baby they removed from the care and gave them, apparently not wrapped properly. The family, for the sake of convenience, put them in a plastic bag, and they noticed on the way that the baby was moving. So this became a huge press. So hospital missed. Later, the inquiry showed that there was a communication gap. I mean, they didn't say that the baby was dead, but they said the baby cannot afford intensive care, so they handed over for palliative care to the family. But as we know, palliative care is not really established in the Indian setup. No concern was given to addressing the parents' concerns on how to wrap the baby, how to support the baby. At least till the baby died, no one declared the death of the baby. They know the baby would die very quickly, but still, and even though it was like a miscarriage at that situation when they can't afford the care, the appropriate level of support to the family was not given. This is not uncommon, unfortunately, in the Indian setup, where the mentality is not to support to the extent that we do in the developed countries. The council also acknowledged the need for setting up the review council for setting up standard operating guidelines for the entire medical fraternity. I think the awareness has increased significantly, and the IMA came up with guidelines on clear approach, and I think Naveen would be able to elaborate more on the current legal position of this. However, an understanding that though babies between 24 and 27 weeks could survive in the best institutes, majority of the settings, 28 weeks and above would be the more realistic target given the restraints that are available and present there. So the outcomes reported from India, this is from a group from PGI and Rainbow Hospital in Hyderabad. So Venkataseshan and Professor Praveen from PGI, Dr. Dinesh Chella and Nalnikant from Hyderabad Rainbow. And they surveyed 70 units, the total number of admissions in these units. And you can see that less than 28 weeks, it was still a reasonably good survival. And these are all centers which have a reasonable level of care. They're training institutes. And if you look at this birth weight based survival, it was fairly good as well. There was another paper from PGI, Professor Kanya had published as well, which confirmed a similar outcome, though they showed that less than 750 grams, more than 750 grams, it was a big divide. So all these units offered, I'm just showing this to show you the different types of training available. So in addition to the people who train overseas and come back, There are also people from DM neonatology background, DNB neonatology. IAP and NNF have both done a great job in increasing the number of fellowships in a structured way. And we do have nursing fellowships as well. And these trainings do focus, and it's like a cascade pattern. When people come out trained, they're able to train those under them better, and the knowledge dissemination happens faster. So the next part is about controversy over antenatal steroids. So it's a well-established treatment from 1990s onwards, and it's given in pregnancies under 35 weeks where there is imminent delivery. It reduces the mortality, the incidence of respiratory distress syndrome, NEC, IVH, and sepsis. Most of the evidence supporting the above benefits, 27 out of the 30 studies were done in the developed countries. And if you see the number of babies, 90% of this population was from developed countries. There was a recent study called the ACT study in the low and middle income countries by Altab et al., which showed potential negative effects, which generated a lot of controversy over our approach to antenatal steroids. So this was published in Reproductive Health in 2012. So it was a community-based cluster randomized trial in 6 low middle income countries: Argentina, Guatemala, India, Kenya, Pakistan, and Zambia. They recruited close to 100,000 live births. Their target was to improve the use of antenatal steroids at the community level. They used expected fetal weight less than the 5th centile to give steroids. However, when the study was analyzed, they found that majority of the mothers did not deliver within 1 week of getting the steroid. And when they actually delivered, only 16% of them had the weight below the 5th centile. So they were just giving the steroids like giving sweets to many of the mothers. So it was not that controlled. The startling part was that in the analysis, they showed that among all the births not in the less than 5th centile alone, they found increased risk of neonatal mortality, which came out statistically significant, and stillbirth as well. They suggested it could be due to an increased risk of infection and maternal health issues in this group. So, however, the population they chose was very wide, not choosing the exact population we would target with antenatal steroids. There was no assessment of gestation and so on. After this, the WHO came out with stringent criteria for antenatal steroids, that the gestational age assessment should be accurately undertaken and the preterm birth should be considered imminent, which is part of the guidelines in any country. There is no clinical evidence of maternal infection, and adequate care should be available. A basic level of support should be available before you give the steroids. And the ACTION trial was done on the ground. This is published in NEJM 2020. And luckily, that was done with a clear methodology of following what the WHO suggested and what is actually to be done. And the similar population, it was published, it was a good number of patient selection. And obviously, the results showed that there was benefit of antenatal steroids in the low middle income countries if it's appropriately used, and there is no increase in the risk of infection as well. So obviously this clarified that it's a patient selection that matters, not the population where you use in. A similar controversy erupted after the Helix trial was published recently by Sudhin Tayil et al. Sudhin was my friend and colleague in Cambridge as well, and currently he's in Imperial College. This was done in India, Sri Lanka, and Bangladesh, and many of you would have read the controversy about this article, which was an offshoot of this team. Dr. Sita Shankaran, who was a pioneer in cooling in the US studies, NICHD studies, was an author in this study as well. And this article, I mean, many of us wrote almost, I don't know the number of publications where there was a letter to the editor. We contributed to that as well. So therapeutic hypothermia is well established in recent years as a standard of care in moderate to severe perinatal asphyxia, and it improved both the short-term and long-term neurologic outcomes. However, there was a gap in the knowledge gap from low and middle income countries, and the Helix study was performed almost with a similar approach to that study. So if the design of the study is faulty, the results cannot be applied on a general basis. They selected all the government institutes, and obviously these centers are excellent. They are teaching institutes, but as I told you in the beginning, the population that comes there are the ones who don't have continuous ongoing care. They are the lower income group where population-based issues will affect the outcome as well. And they made far-reaching statements based on their study that therapeutic hypothermia should not be offered in low-income countries, and it might amount to criminal malpractice. So it was very surprising that they made such statements based on a study which had limitations. I'll come to the limitations next. So nearly 70% of the babies recruited in either group were outborn. There was poor initial care and lack of appropriate resuscitation, almost like the ACT study where the steroids were given without confirming the gestational age. Here, the babies who received the cooling were not appropriately resuscitated, so the start was poor. The cord pH was only available in 22 babies, and even the 5-minute Apgar was documented only in a small number. We all know that cooling will reduce secondary brain injury. It doesn't affect the primary brain injury, which happens before the baby is born. So the care is poor after birth. The primary injury is aggravated as well, and it leads to extended asphyxia. So obviously, you don't expect a good outcome even after you prevent the secondary injury. And we know that the level of care in different settings is very variable, as I already highlighted. In the corporate hospitals and in the medical college units, we often find care matching those in the developed countries. However, if the patient population coming to you is poor and you are including outborn babies, you're not controlling for the quality of care as well. So these examples illustrate the difficulty faced from interpreting the results of studies done in the Western setup in our country as the possibly flawed information. These are Western sponsored research. Luckily, the Bill Gates Foundation was the one who sponsored the ACTION study, which corrected the previous mistake of the ACT study. And hopefully they will bring up some study. They sponsored the HELIX study as well. So hopefully they'll focus on a more properly conducted study, the appropriate patient choice for the HELIX studies counterpart as well. So there is no clear remedy for this. Unfortunately, there is great variation in population demographics, affordability, and accessibility to good quality healthcare. So this will lead to huge variations in outcome. And unless the population demographics of India changes, I think we are improving as a whole. The government focus is there and we are in the right direction, but it's going to take another good 20 years for us to reach a level where there is a little more equitable distribution of healthcare. Just the last part, we have a couple of points on ethics and medico-legal aspects. So there are 4 pillars, as we know: beneficence, non-maleficence, autonomy, and justice. So the part about rationing care or universal equitable distribution comes under the justice component. These will be more individualized according to the case scenario. However, in resource-limited settings, it may be limited due to poor healthcare resources, availability of healthcare in relation to population size, so you may need rationing, affordability in case of private care, and overstretching of the available resources. As we saw in the COVID pandemic, even if you have resources, they get overstretched very quickly. Medico-legal aspects of care in resource-limited settings is very important as well. As you know, there is huge variability, and affordability, accessibility, resource limitation is not in the provider's hands. So often you may get a patient who is much sicker than would have been if they have been cared for appropriately from the very beginning. Again, because there is hugely variable settings and facilities, it's difficult to benchmark and you cannot apply the Western standards, for example, in the Indian setting. And even if you develop a guideline, I know the national councils and the NNF-IAP are bringing up guidelines for different conditions. And even if they set standards, it's difficult to apply it when there is a resource limitation. So when it comes to complaint or say mortality and investigations based on that, how can you conclude in a fair way, which is fair to both the provider and the patient? So it's very, very complicated. Again, till the equity distribution is balanced, we cannot really solve the problem. So just a few slides on how we can approach such issues. I know Professor Srinivasan and other leaders have done a lot of work, focus on grassroots level breastfeeding. And even in those days, he used to comment on vaccines, which are a priority, not go for the high fetched vaccines. Of course, now it's more generally available, most of the vaccines. An estimated 15 million babies are born too early every year in the world, and 1 million children die. In low-income countries, nearly 50% of the babies below 32 weeks die due to lack of cost-effective care, warmth, breastfeeding support, hygiene related to infection and breathing difficulties. And in high-income countries, most of these babies would survive. It would be very rare to lose a baby below about 28 weeks in these setups. So the WHO came up with the Born Too Soon Action Report, and this is the distribution of the 15 million babies. So the high-income countries have 1.2 million babies, full access to healthcare. Middle-income countries where 3.8 million preterm babies, they have neonatal units, varying levels of support. And in the low-income countries, you have two levels. One is the home birth and care. A proportion of them would come in the better equipped places as well. And you do have a significant number who are delivered in facilities like the SNCU I mentioned in India, where you have some support, but not the full level of support. So most premature babies born, more than 80% of the premature babies are born between 32 and 37 weeks. They just need simple care. And 10% are born between 28 to less than 32 weeks. And in the low-income countries, majority in this group will die, but they could be saved with some additional focus, like we are doing on CPAP, the knowledge on CPAP spreading and proper use of antenatal steroids, prevention of infection, and ways to feed them like the breastfeeding, kangaroo care, and Pallada feeding. For those below 28 weeks, it's a far-fetched to save them all over the country. Only in the affording population where you have corporate hospitals or insurance covers the good centers, you may be able to save them. So we should be realistic when it comes to extreme premature babies in the cost-limited settings. In many countries, families and healthcare providers still perceive the death of any premature baby is inevitable. So in rural India, for example, they may not even consider a baby born at 28 to 32 weeks as able to survive. They will just give up on the baby and may not take them for proper care. This is a pyramid which shows you obviously the base is broad and you just need to focus on essential maternal and newborn care, prevention of asphyxia, training the birth attendants in proper resuscitation, simple measures. Unfortunately, we do have mortalities even in this group, as I mentioned in the initial parts. And in the babies between 32 to 36 weeks, you need a little bit extra care, the warmth provision, prevention of infection, supporting their feeding, maybe treatment of jaundice as well. And the prevention of infection is a part which needs a lot of attention, education in general population about hygiene, which often is lacking as well. And this needs to start right from the schools, and it's the Swachh Bharat initiative and things which bring focus on not defecating, and now the COVID pandemic would hopefully improve knowledge of hand washing. So these things might help. The care of the preterm baby with complications between 28 to 31 weeks, and this group we may have to give up unless they are really in the privileged group. And the loss of human capital is mentioned here, and long-term effects in a resource-limited setting. The complications of saving these extreme premature babies, many of them have neurologic abnormalities and their outcome is difficult. The support that they need lifelong is not available in these settings. So again, we should focus less unless you can really afford. So it feels harsh to say that unless you afford, you don't get it, but that is the group that we can probably say that, not the others. Antenatal steroids, I clarified on the ACT study and the ACTION study, which has clarified it should be used in an appropriate way, even in the low middle income countries. And we should train them in the non-invasive ventilation. So the NNF, IAP, they are doing a great job in spreading this. And there's a lot of focus in the conferences in India on non-invasive ventilation, using it in a low cost way. Manufacturers are producing equipment which can be cost effective. We don't need to rely on Western people. And when they are locally manufactured, the servicing becomes easier as well. I remember in PGI days when we used to do bubble CPAP, indigenous bubble CPAP we used to call it, and it worked as well. And that's the basic type of CPAP that Gregory designed. And kangaroo mother care and breastfeeding has been shown to work wonders. There are many studies coming out, 28 to 32 weeks, hand hygiene, infection prevention, early feeding, and supporting breastfeeding and kangaroo care. The mothers stay in the unit, they are the primary carers, so their cross-infection rate becomes less as well. And you can have a good outcome in these babies. Training nurses in addressing the infection prevention and feeding support, use of IV fluid, safe oxygen use. So the 32 to 39 weeks or the 28 to 32 weeks even can be saved majority of the time. And CPAP saves 95% of these babies. So surfactant inadequacy can be countered by early start of CPAP in appropriate way and use of antenatal steroids as well. So we may not still be able to afford surfactant in a wide basis. And timely detection of sepsis and early antibiotic treatment is important. Teaching and involving the families more in the routine care. The advantage is stressing on cascade effect, education in the population. Suppose this mother is in the hospital, she learns the nuances and she can cascade it down to other mothers. They can be involved in education more in the society. And low-cost measures to improve outcome, clean birth kits, basic resuscitation. When I was training in Chandigarh, we used to have the system, the train birth attendant training, and I used to go and teach them as well. So we have focus on basics, the foot soldiers who go to the houses to deliver the babies, and they need basic knowledge as well. And delayed cord clamping in a resource limited setting, it becomes very important, not only the iron deficiency, it's also the antibodies that the babies get, which they would miss out, the stem cells that comes through the delayed cord clamping. These are crucial for helping the baby. And early skin to skin focus on breastfeeding, the WHO code of ethics on BFHI, and not to promote formula. If they do need formula, give it in a hygienic way. So the focus on education, not ignoring that group who need formula, but focusing on improving the knowledge base. Cord infection is still a problem. We don't see that many neonatal tetanus, hopefully. I remember going to the isolation ward in Jipmer and managing the neonatal tetanus cases, sudden spasms and very sad pictures. So we shouldn't see them anymore. And Aquaphor or similar emollient. One of the main heartening factors that I heard from my colleagues in India is that we hardly see the old Kwashiorkor marasmus. When Suma was my senior resident and we were rounding together in what 21, the last cubicle was only for Kwashiorkor marasmus patients. So we don't see them anymore in the typical way. That's great news as well. So this is where we should go for. I mean, focus on simple care that can be delivered by the mother, safe practices, educate them, hand hygiene, clean feeding. So focus on what we can do, education, help in the resource limited settings as well. To conclude, resource limitation and healthcare inequality will not be removed anytime soon. There is a great need for political will. Everyone should commit their bit to educate and spread knowledge. Prioritize care according to the expected outcome. So rationing of care, focusing on high effectiveness measures that can be achieved easily, even though it's unfortunate for the small group of extremely tiny babies. That's the best that can be achieved. And actually by saving the resources used, you can focus on saving the 32 weekers or the 29, 30 weekers even. And in the private setup, of course, where the parents can afford, approach can be similar to the Western setup. So the outcome of the Helix study or the so-called no cooling in the low middle income countries is not appropriate. You have to individualize your recommendation to the setup, and you have to recognize that in a low middle income country, the options available are wide. In the public sector, unfortunately, we need to accept the limitations, but we need to fight to keep improving. And the leaderships of these hospitals should recognize that the focus should be on cost-effective interventions to save more babies, and then get to the sophisticated level and go for the expensive interventions as well. So Dr. Vidya mentioned about my YouTube channel. It's not only for parent education. There are many playlists for pediatricians, neonatologists as well. The aim is to share knowledge and to avoid unnecessary mistakes in healthcare. I request you to go through that as well. So I'm sure we'll have a great session for discussion. I'll stop sharing the screen now.
Thank you, Sridhar. Over to you, Naveen and Leela.
Leela, ma'am, up to you.
See, I came back from abroad about 25 years ago after having worked for 6 years in North America. At that time, when I came, everybody looked at me in disdain and were very skeptical about what I was doing. It was very difficult. Naveen, you were just a bacha then. It was difficult, but what we learned, we tried to apply. And as you obviously know, those days, public sector and government institutes had nothing. It was always you send a tender and you get whatever is available. I remember talking to BMC Nair sir at that time. He was very frustrated. Things have improved. There is a lot of goodwill in the government sector. And I think people are trying to make things better. See, it's reached the point where when I have to give surfactant, I work in a mission hospital. So we do see quite a few poor people. And they have to decide whether they can afford surfactants or not. The flip side is that in the government sector, that is free. Everything is free. But what I'm doing today is what I learned 20 years ago. But what actually makes me happy is that almost everybody is doing that now. So it's not something that we should be dismissing. But like Sridhar said, I think the political will has to come in the public sector. Private sector, it's fine. I mean, what I did there and what I did today are the same things, frankly speaking. And you know, Dr. Devasper, both of us trained abroad, and we do it the right thing. What worries me are two things. One is the nursing. You see, you will never, they train and they go. And the ratio of nursing to babies will never be adequate, number one. And number two, CPAP is good, non-invasive is good, but I don't think people understand the inherent danger of not having a backup system. CPAP is not easy. It has to be monitored. That worries me a bit, Naveen. I don't know. What's your take on that?
Firstly, I enjoyed listening to Sridhar because we have had, myself and Sridhar, many medical and non-medical discussions for hours together this way. When Sridhar just took me under his wings when I joined PGI, which at that time was definitely a challenging change from coming from Government Medical College Trivandrum, which was very warm, friendly, and was not having so many complex new medical care like we were in PGI. So there were changes both in medical as well as in non-medical environment. So it was lovely to once again hear Sridhar, and it's even more heartening to see that Sridhar hasn't left any of the ideas and thoughts that he had, and he has just strung together his experiences in UK and his current world, and still remembers fondly everything from his teachers in PGI and JIPMER. On a positive note, if I look at it, what to me has changed the best in the last so many years is the years when Sridhar and myself joined PGI. Just like Leela ma'am said, had handful of people who were taking training in the country. It was, in fact, there was a time when I was not sure whether I should join DM because the number of people who were taking DM entrance at that time in PGI was 34, the year which I gave the entrance exam, and 350 people were standing for DM cardiology. So I thought I accidentally applied for a course which has no endpoint.
I remember Dr. Shabrinath also told me, why are you coming and trying to do this?
If you look at it now, the number of fellowship programs in the country are more than 60 to 70 centers. And although there are concerns raised by teachers that they may not be the best or they may have limitations training, but still the ownership of the subject has increased. So these people who train and go out, they at least improve hugely the basic neonatal care. They talk about hypothermia being not done. They manage jaundice better. They prevent hypoglycemia. They try to stop overuse of antibiotics. They refer babies correctly. They force hospitals to buy better infrastructure. They do train nurses when they're very young, and so a lot of things have changed. Only thing is these students sometimes get disappointed because not all of them go away to districts and towns. They try to stay on in the city, and then they find difficulties.
That's the problem. Where they are needed is in the periphery. But everybody wants the ICU, so-called ICU setup. That's
just like what Leela ma'am said, one more thing, which is that huge money has come into National Health Mission. Unimaginable money has come in.
The RSKB also is supposed to catch it, is supposed to be taking care of the follow-up. I don't know. I mean, I need somebody in the government sector to tell me. I think KK is there. He had said hi to me. He is very much involved in that Hridayam. That is something which is just taken off, like nobody's business. Is KK there?
Yeah, I'm there, Leela.
Yeah. KK, how did Hridayam become such a success? Or, I mean, for you guys, it became unmanageable. It was so much.
Yeah,
I
so
don't know if
it's
yeah.
success, right place, right time, right people. I think that's what. It was the fortuitous alignment of some key elements that just happened together. Kerala has the largest number of pediatric heart programs per capita, four, and really high quality, two large volume centers, good neonatal and infant heart surgery already established. A very willing government that was really keen on improving the healthcare. Extraordinarily committed minister in Shailaja Teacher. Positive health secretary who was completely for making a change. A very willing mission, committed person in Srihari who drove that program. And then, of course, there was Kerala is an extremely mature group of pediatricians. So the IAP in Kerala in 2013 identified the fact that we were stuck at IMR of 12, 10 to 12 for years together, and said that we need to figure out a way to get this down. And they identified congenital heart disease as the biggest killer. And so Hridayam was brought in primarily because all this happened together, and we like jumped in the private sector. Usually the private sector is very afraid to do this kind of stuff, but for some reason, some of us were very keen on doing it, even if it meant to be, commercially not perceived as viable or something like that. But we decided we have to do it. And all this happened together fortuitously. And finally, the success, of course, it translated. I don't know how much it contributed to the reduction in IMR, but certainly a 40% reduction in congenital heart deaths have occurred over this period of time. And a huge number of babies have been operated, nearly 3,000 babies. So it's been an amazing story for sure. And I think I see so many parallels between what was discussed in today's talk versus what can be done for pediatric heart care nationally, because I think that's the next frontier.
Enlightening. I see Professor Bhatt and Professor Srinivasan here, my teachers, my gurus. So do they have anything to comment? I mean, I know I mentioned during the talk that I learned a lot on basics from you, and that's a basic. And I mean, the stress on physiology, Professor Bhatt was very keen on physiology as well, basics, repeatedly drilling into you. So those things change your approach to medicine as a whole. Can I invite them to comment, please, if it's okay, Naveen?
And Dr. Srinivasan? Good evening, sir.
You're muted. You're muted, sir.
Yeah, Dr. Vishnu Bhatt is there, and yes, he has done his thesis with Dr. Vishnu Bhatt. I think Vishnu Bhatt should be the person to give his comments, and he is there. Yeah, Vishnu, please.
I think it was interesting to listen to, of course. Yeah, good evening. So, nice meeting online. And the talk was good because he covered most of the important issues as Dr. Leela was telling. And I'm sure that we are going in the right direction, although the pace may not be as fast as we think, because finance is one of the most important issue, as you put it. And I'm sure that we are in the right direction. And mortality definitely will come down in years to come. Of course, many people go abroad, and of course, the working may be entirely different because you have a better setup, better facilities. And Sridhar was a very good student. He did the thesis. Because that was published in the early study. Of course, we were focusing mostly on important issues related to newborn care, like neonatal sepsis, perinatal asphyxia, overweight weight management. These are our main focus. So all PG's work comes to me. I used to give this type of talk, and most of our studies are based on that. And
he did a good job, and he was a very good student from Stanley, and we are lucky to have him. And he was third in the All India rank in getting MD. I'm correct, Sridhar? I'm remembering well. And
You
not
added
only
one
he
more,
did
sir, it's 4.
pediatrics, not only he did pediatrics sincerely, but also he chose his partner in a very subtle way that we came to know very late. So both of them are made for each other. So I've been watching his progress and his contributions to education with his videos, etc. All the best. I enjoyed your talk. Thank you so much.
Sridhar, you wanted to call on Professor Vijay Kumar, right? Is he still there?
Vijay Kumar is there.
Hello.
Hello, sir. Hi.
So your camera is not on, sir. We can't see you.
Oh. I'm sorry, I'm not able to.
Never mind, sir. Thank you.
It's a real pleasant surprise that Dr. Sridhar is able to recognize me. And I really enjoyed his lecture, and very useful lecture. And certainly very happy in front of the great professor like Professor Srinivasan and all to hear him. Are you able to hear me, madam?
Yes, sir. Loud and clear.
Yeah. It was a really it's a great lecture. And since I am, even after retirement, I am with the National Health Mission. What are the things he suggested?
So you got muted, sir. So you got muted, sir. Yes, sir. Please. Yes, sir.
Actually, most of his suggestions, which we are actually putting into action for the last decade in Tamil Nadu, I got retired as a professor from 2010 with a very efficient team from the National Health Mission and my colleagues. We are able to do something. I think I request Dr. Sridhar to visit again our institute, including IOG, Secretary of Excellence, and the RSRM Hospital, where he was trained in basic neonatal resuscitation. Really is a great moment for me to listen to his lecture, and thank you. And I fully appreciate Dr. Naveen's crisp analysis of what is reality which is happening. And we are worried about the numbers also, but particular mother, her baby is important. That may be the our motto behind. I mean, trying to salvage the babies. Thank you.
Professor Mahadevan is also here.
Yes.
Dr. Mahadevan, a few words from you.
I'm very lucky to have all the teachers here. Amazing.
I think you can ask Sridhar to whistle for one song. He is a very good whistler.
Hello, it's nice to hear Sridhar. And first is, let me congratulate Sridhar. Your daughter is making it to Oxford. That's something very good. And second thing is a very clear presentation. And you not only went into depth, but it was very practical. And of course, Naveen, you always enjoy the company. And Naveen said, do it right when it matters. And I think you really said it, Naveen. Thank you very much. And thanks for this session, Dr. Vidya and Dr. Leela. Nice to meet with you. Maybe the first time I'm meeting with you, but it is a pleasure to hear you.
Dr. Padmapriya, could you share your thoughts on this topic?
Yeah, that's nice. I was telling Dr. Patra that it's good, that they were bringing this up during the prelude to the newborn week. So Naveen is a good friend. I know Suma as well. And of course, all the professors, Dr. Srinivas, Vijay Kumar, Dr. Bhatt and everyone. So yeah, I think Dr. Sridhar has put it very correctly that, unfortunately, cost is a factor. We call it expensive intensive care, and sometimes it's not worthwhile running after the 24, 26 weeker because they just can't afford it. It's not just a one-time care, it's a long drawn out care, and also the, the long-term outcome has to be looked into. But I think things are really improving, and I definitely know I trained abroad that DM was not existing at that point of time, or it just started. And then when I came back, and it was all, I had the fortune of coming back to Child Stress Hospital where I was trained. So we could have the resources to kind of do all the lines and, do the intensive care. But what was not so in the government hospital where we trained at that point of time. But right now, it's like Dr. Vijay Kumar said, there's a huge change in the SNCUs all over the country, particularly Tamil Nadu. The health in the rural setup and all has improved a lot in the neonatal care and everything. But yes, still a lot needs to be done. And yes, I do agree with Dr. Sridhar that yes, finance is a cost, is a factor. And even the private sector needs to be more organized. And I wish the insurance comes in. I just heard that one company, I don't know if it's a Star Health or something, is also doing the insurance for the newborns, because newborn health insurance is something which is not in vogue right now. Unless they are the corporate, only the corporate insurance covers them sometimes. Otherwise, people have to pay from their pocket, and not everyone can afford it. Yeah. Thanks for the opportunity and very good talks, Sridhar. Thank you.
Thank you.
We have Sanjay Arora, another neonatologist from US. Sanjay, your comment, please.
Oh, hi there. Sorry. I just joined Dr. Mahadev, and I just ran into your granddaughter, who was an undergrad student with my daughter at Johns Hopkins.
Okay.
And congratulations. She's a medical student in Florida. She and my daughter did Bharatanatyam together. So
Thank you.
Yeah, no, it's heartwarming to see all the progress being made in neonatology. It's really good, and just wanted to express my gratitude to Dr. Mahadev and Dr. Srinivasan and Dr. Bhatt, who are my teachers. So, and keep doing all the good work you're doing there. And if you need any support, I'm in Boston, US. So be happy to help. Yeah.
Thank you. It was very nice.
Thank you. Thank you, Sanjay.
I got to run. I'm doing patient care right now. So take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, Sanjay.
We can hear for one of the younger people. Andrea, are you there?
Andrea Josephine is there.
Andrea, would you like to say something?
Good evening, ma'am. I'm working in Chennai Corporation in Padi Ambattur Hospital as a pediatrician here, ma'am. And ours is a secondary care center. We have around 100 to 120 deliveries per month. And our primary referral center is Institute of Child Health in Chennai. And I'm the sole pediatrician here. So the newborn staff, we have 4 newborn staff under us. And so the ones who we train, like we work together. And when I go only in the mornings, like in the nights, there is one of the newborn staff and the duty medical officer on duty. So we kind of manage the newborn in our hospital. So we manage only like we don't keep very sick babies there because we don't have a night pediatrician to monitor them. So that is our setup. It was very nice to hear from seniors and to meet our respected teachers, Dr. Srinivasan, Dr. Mahadevan, and Dr. Bhatt. Thank you, ma'am, for organizing this.
Thank you. Ravi is there. Ravi Shankar is from college.
Would you
Are
like
you talking about me? Okay.
There's
so many
Ravi Shankar.
So,
hey,
well, I have to say that my connection to neonatology can be considered as some sort of Sahavasa dosham, because the first batch of DM neonatology candidates from PGI Chandigarh included my batchmate Arvind Shenoy and Kajori Ghosh. And so, I've been associated with the program indirectly from that time on, and obviously still remain in touch with a whole bunch of them, including the very illustrious Ambalavarnan. So that's my connection. But anyway, thank you for this session because it introduced me to Sridhar and Naveen, other fellow PGI alumni. And also I saw a reference to Karthik Nagesh, who's another good friend from PGI. Of course, the icing on the cake is to see the triumvirates, Professors Srinivasan, Mahadevan, and Dr. Vishnu Bhatt. So thank you so much. I do have a question for Sridhar. One of the things that really, that I enjoyed immensely as a resident in pediatrics and PGI was their community pediatrics initiatives through the Department of Community Medicine. Vijay Kumar, Professor Vijay Kumar and his group did a lot of wonderful stuff. Many of those studies were funded by WHO. And there was another senior resident called Sharad Iyengar who also did a lot of work there. I mean, any comments about community improvements and things at home? Obviously, one of the first things that they were involved way back when, and I'm going to date myself, was the study on Janam Guthi and how it's not a good idea to use it. That's that combination with, I guess, some opioid in there that's fed to babies as soon as they're born. And I think it was a way of selecting the fittest, survival of the fittest, because the babies would sleep and not feed, and I think the weaklings got weeded out. But one of the things was to stop its use. So they did a lot of work on that when I was there. But obviously, I'm sure they're continuing their project. So any idea, anything to talk about that?
No, certainly. I mean, obviously, I mentioned about the traditional birth attendant and training them. I mean, from JIPMER, I went as well. And from PGI, I did an audit on educating them on the breastfeeding practices, getting appropriate latch. Professor Vijay Kumar was there and Professor Naran. They guided me on the project. And obviously, grassroots level, improving the basics is what the focus is. And it's not just that small territory, the primary health center that we select, but it should be all over every single health center. And that's why what I mentioned about the cascade training becomes very important, that the zeal to improve should be there within everyone. And having more trained people going into the outer reaches of the community will definitely improve the knowledge base. And even YouTube channels are one way to reach out to people to spread this basic knowledge. I mean, improve your basics first. You don't need to go hi-fi medicine. Do what you do correctly at the right time. And I again repeat what Naveen said and Professor Mahadevan stressed. So timing is important. Know the basics. So because knowing the physiology, knowing the basics is enough to improve most of the basic problems that we face. Thank you for the contribution.
No, I wanted to say that, you guys probably never had the most horrible thing to deal with, a tetanus ward. I'm sure it's something.
Recently, they don't.
Oh, you did? Okay, because that was my biggest nightmare on call. That was my biggest nightmare on call, because the tetanus ward was so far away from the regular pediatric ward. And whenever there was an emergency, by the time you got there, I used to dream of having skates and stuff like that to get there much faster than I could. But it was one of the most horrible things. And if it is still a problem, then it is a bigger problem.
This is like 20 years ago, not now, when I was training in JIPMER. So we had the isolation ward, as you said, behind the, I think the whole structure has changed.
Yeah, behind casualty in JIPMER, but in PGI it was even further away. So we had to literally walk, half a mile to get there. So it was a pain and not very nice.
Dr. Ramchandran?
ER3.
Thank you. Dr. Sridhar, your talk was excellent, and inputs from all the stalwarts in my teacher, Professor Srinivasan, and my seniors, Dr. Vishnu Bhatt and Mahadevan, were quite illuminating. I would like to mention at this juncture, in Tamil Nadu, we really owe it to many of the neonatologists and pediatricians who took it to the community, like Professor Jayam and Professor Chandra from Stanley Medical College. And also, after that, Professor James Close Associate, Professor Kumuda, who is still continuing to educate and train and bring to focus the importance of extending the information, whatever is there, to the community, to all the budding pediatrician as well as the neonatologists. So this is a very important thing, and this is also caught the attention of the government of Tamil Nadu, and they were all associated with many of the programs of the extension of the services. And the SMCUs in Tamil Nadu, we owe it to the people like Professor Vijay Kumar, Dr. Srinivasan of NRHM, plus also many NGOs. Please remember that their participation also has been wonderful. Like Dr. Sai, probably many of you might know of her. Okay, so ACOM group, they recruited many of these nurses and trained them, which really helped in equipping the district level hospitals to a great level. So I think it's a wonderful collaborative effort, and nurtured by many of the basic institutions, and helped by stalwarts like people who got trained in neonatology, both India and abroad. And we owe it to the people who got trained in abroad also, bringing their knowledge and their expertise to our neonatologists and our children, newborn babies. Thanks so much for the opportunity.
Thank you. As mentioned by Dr. PRC, Dr. NRHM Srinivasan, who is now in the ICH, he has done so much by getting all the funds for establishing in all district hospitals excellent maternal neonatal care, and he is instrumental in that. I'm happy that Ramachandran mentioned his contribution. Thank you so much.
Pata, you were trying to say something?
No, it's a very heartwarming subject, I should say, and it's been dealt so nicely in a very simple manner. Because as a non-pediatrician, there's something very new, and I understand that there is so much concern among pediatricians about improving infant mortality rates. It's a lovely lecture, great discussion, and it's nice to see so many of my teachers as well.
I'm happy to tell you that you will be hearing more from KK next month. Ravi Shankar managed to rope him in, so you'll hear more from him next month. And Sridhar, before finishing, by popular demand, you have to whistle a song for us.
That's good. I mean, I have one question to ask Naveen.
Yeah. Go right ahead.
Kannai Kalaimane. That is how he attracted the.
Sure, sir. I'll try, but I'll ask one thing
Vidya,
about.
Can I just? Yeah, absolutely. I just thought you guys were done. Sridhar, you go ahead and ask a question. After that, Dr. Leela wants to say something.
Had something to say.
Sridhar, you go ahead and ask a question. After that, Dr. Leela wants to say something.
No problem. Naveen, I just wanted to know about the medico-legal position that I told you. I mean, do you face cases? Are you going to assess cases? And how do the senior people who assess medico-legal issues from the medical fraternity approach this disparity in level of care?
Sridhar, I agree with you fully. There is lack of understanding by we as doctors on what we can access, even if there is something written down. After the last incident happened and we had to do the editing of the chapters for Guwahati, I tried getting to the most medico-legal experts as to what to write as a position in India. But there is no statement on even simpler things like if you transport a baby and he dies on the way, who does he belong to? If a preterm baby is 28 weeker in a resource limited setting, is it the same as in whereas countries like Indonesia, Thailand have written down clear guidelines for the country. So there is a lot to be done, because even though statements have come from IMA, NNF, IAP, they need to be endorsed by the legal systems. So we are living on a thin line many times and trying to live in good faith, good communication, good documentation. But at the end of the day, whether it is supported by the law, the current aspects on end-of-life care, which have been endorsed by the court, again, we do not know even how to approach the High Court if we have to. It's such a tedious process, at least as we see it, that getting a legal shape into end-of-life care, all these things are still very challenging.
Naveen, I think we follow the Shanbag case scenario where we are not allowed to withdraw. So it's really a question of not allowing reintubation, but we are not allowed to withdraw even now medically legally. That's where it's become a subtle difference. Previously, we did have a say. After that court order, it's become very great.
When we were in Chandigarh, we used to withdraw the grade 4 IVH many times, but so it's
Now
not
by law, no, by law you can't. You have to get a court order. So what happens quite often is that, if the baby otherwise becomes not requiring respiratory care and we're able to extubate, then the parents will write that they don't want reintubation. You see, they can always say they don't want ventilation, but nobody is allowed to take off. That is where the medical legal stand is right now.
Thank you.
If anybody else has any questions or comments, please unmute yourself. And
Suma wanted to say something, but she jutted in.
Yeah, a couple of things actually. Sridhar, that was a lovely talk.
We can't see you, Suma.
You want to see me? Okay. Okay. Right. Sridhar, that was a lovely
remaining
talk.
hidden though. He's remaining hidden. Go ahead.
So, yeah, it's nice to see, so many people I know, including my teachers. And yes, I think neonatology has come a long way from the time when I was a PG resident and I was Sridhar's senior resident. However, I work in a field which I think today in India is like how neonatology was in the 90s. And for me, listening to the entire discussion was actually more about, it was instructive because it gives me some ideas on to how to improve my field and get it better recognized and improve the conditions there. So it was very interesting from that front.
Dr. Suma, what is your field?
I do pediatric rheumatology.
Oh.
Already doing a very good job.
President of the Rheumatology Society.
I can tell very confidently she's already doing a very good job.
In BMJ, she had a publication.
Nice.
Thank you, sir. The thing is, it's more about, getting the awareness so that we get things picked up, because that's what's happened in neonatology. Like above 28 weekers is a good story in many places now.
Actually, I was going to say not 32, 28 is where we, start hoping. Yeah, not 32. 32 is a long time ago. Yeah.
No, I meant above 28 is a good story now in most places.
Top, I agree. I want to actually bring that up. That in fact, I think 28 has become a good benchmark now.
And that's such a great thing. That's such a great thing, actually. When I look back to 30 years ago, it's 30 years ago that I joined my MD. So
one of Vishnu Bhatt's PG, 450 grams child, preterm, is doing very well now. I think the child must be now 2 years old or 2.5 years old. So,
wonderful. Wonderful.
Yeah, because people
thank you.
People are having only 1 or 2 children nowadays, by and large, especially in the South. So they are willing to do whatever they can. It is for us to try and provide whatever we can by whatever means. And we spent a lot of time trying to see what resources are available, because if you go looking, there are things available. We mustn't just give up. It's not correct. That is my approach, what I've learned. Yeah.
It's a mixed bag with IVFs.
Right. Anyway, it's wonderful to actually be interacting with everyone, including my teachers, actually, Dr. Srinivasan, Dr. Bhatt, Dr. Mahadevan. It's Dr. Nalini didn't log in somehow. It would be nice to have had her also.
I was going to say that if Suma had not revealed herself, I was going to ask Sridhar to whistle Maraindirinde Pesum Marmam Enna.
Maraindirinde Parkum
Maraindirinde Parkum Marmam Enna.
பார்க்கும் இல்ல இது பேசும்.
பேசும் படம்.
Correct.
So Sridhar, everyone's waiting for you to whistle now.
If you want to tolerate it, it's fine. I'll do a short one.
Right.
I don't know how it will come out with this computer Zoom, but
Sridhar, come.
Thank you.
Yeah, Sridhar, if we had known before, I would have told you about the special settings that you need to do on Zoom for music. Then it would have been, more easy for us. Thank you everybody for joining. Thank you Sridhar, Naveen and Leela for being part of the session. And thank you Dr. Srinivasan, Dr. Mahadevan and Dr. Vishnu Bhatt for joining in. Thank you everyone.
Our pleasure.
Those in Chennai, please take care and stay safe. And I mean, coastal Tamil Nadu and rest of you, we'll meet again next Thursday on another episode of Marvelous Medicine. Good night and take care.